All right, welcome to Buddy Book Club. I'm Dylan here with the fastest pinnace this side of the belt. Keith, what's up, buddy?
How we doing? I'm joined by the Holden to my Miller, D-Man. And by me being Miller, I mean the rampant alcoholism that I have and the voices I hear in my head constantly.
Well, here at the Buddy Book Club, we're breaking down some bestsellers, and this week we'll be discussing Leviathan Wakes by Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, a.k.a. James S.A. Corey. If you'd like to recommend a book for us to read or reach out to us about any past episodes, you can visit our website, buddybookclub.com, or slide into our DMs on Twitter or Instagram, Buddy Book Club Podcast. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast, so please download and subscribe. No one's putting out all this content. I mean, we've read fucking 74 books or something like that. Well, there's some movies in there too. You know, I'm proud of us. Pat on your back.
I heard recently that only 2% of podcasts get over 20 episodes.
To all the 14 listeners out there, we do appreciate it. And speaking about listeners, this is another listener reco, Leviathan Wakes. It's the first book in the Expanse series, of which there are like 9 books. Some of those are novellas. It's a 4.3 on Goodreads out of like 250,000 ratings. So this one's well received. I don't know this term, but every time I was looking this book up, it was like, oh, it's a space opera. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I saw that on the cover of it. Yeah, there's a lot of music in it, or what's the deal?
Yeah, like space opera just makes me think of like a really poorly made play where there's just like hanging spaceships flying around. But maybe I'm just a dullard. I mean, I'm definitely a dullard. But it's a really interesting book in that it's almost like half crime, like noir crime, and then also half like this geopolitical situation going on.
The opera.
That's
right,
the opera part. Oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
The third half is vomit zombies. Put those 3 halves together and you got a whole.
That math checks out. Yeah, for sure.
Let's just jump into it with some stock up, stock down. Stock up, what do you got?
Stock up, U571.
Oh, stop it. Stop it right now. That's one of my all-timers.
I just rewatched this. The GF didn't like it. The SGF did not care for it.
How dare she?
We obviously know Matty McConaughey. We read his book. Great book. But there's a lot of parallels between the two. We kind of go into the world of Holden here, and Holden is kind of the lower-in-command guy.
XO, second in command.
Well-liked by everyone, but not really the head honcho, the leader. He gets sent off on a little boat to check out another boat. And then while he's trying to go back, that boat explodes.
Yeah.
And then he has to kind of go back to the original boat, which I guess he's on the original boat. But you know what I'm saying.
And everything's written in German. Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, right. And then he kind of like has to learn to become a leader and man this new crew and kind of be the head honcho all of a sudden. And he has to deal with the fact that just like Matty McConaughey, every person in the world wants to bang him, you know? Every single person just throwing themselves at him.
Yep.
And he's just too nice of a guy and he doesn't want to break hearts, but, you know, he still does. So, but very similar to U571, and there's all the Navy terminology.
Yeah, there's
I kept on saying Corvette, by the way, and I was like, Chevrolet is really crushing it here, but apparently that's a small boat. Yeah. I didn't realize that. So, U571, stock up.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, in that very small situation where when they leave the Canterbury to go check out the Sculpuli. Yeah, that is exactly like U571 in that brief moment. So I'm glad that you zoomed in on that, because anytime we get an opportunity to talk about U571, I'd be interested to know that Rotten Tomato variance, because it really is one of my all-time faves. But yeah, the Corvette thing was interesting. Also, like I wasn't joking at the top here when I was talking about the pinnace. Every time they said it, I was like, okay, this is a joke, right? The authors are sliding this in there as a joke. But I guess not. In like the sail days of the world, when we were going around on boats with sails, the pinnace was like your side craft that you would go out in with oars, but it could also like have a sail if needed. So it was like your tender. If you're a below deck kind of person, the tender was the pinnace. So now I learned more about ship stuff. My first stock up is Mass Murderers.
We're back. We're back, boys.
I think the point of this book is just that if you're a mass murderer, you deserve a second chance. And I'm going to focus on Fred, the Butcher of Anderson Station. The way nicknames go, this is a top 10%er. If someone was like, oh, this is my buddy Keith, the Butcher of Anderson Station, you'd be like, whoa, this guy's got something going on. You know, he's interesting.
Shout outs to Hitch, but yeah, totally. That's a deep cut reference to Hitch.
Yeah, go on. Frederick here, he is working for the UN Navy and kills a ton of belters. Anderson Station butchers them all And now he's the leader of the Belters, the OPA. He's pretty much like the leader of this OPA. So if he didn't get that second chance, say that the OPA got their hands on him and just like drawn and quartered him, they wouldn't realize that they had their future leader in their hands. So we got to look at mass murders and give them a second chance. Not unlike our guy Benjamin Martin, Mel Gibson in The Patriot, who kills all those people at Fort Wilderness. And if he had got what he deserved, he'd probably be dead. But he goes around and wins the war. And that's exactly how it happened in real life.
Speaking of historically accurate movies, you're saying that, and U571. Yeah, of course. Okay.
They're definitely historically accurate, both of those.
Okay, perfect.
It's not historical fiction in the least. It's funny, the Patriot one, because the whole Fort Wilderness, everything about that is completely fabricated. Like, there's nothing about that that's real. Even when they're like, oh, it's along this river. Well, it turns out that river's actually in New Hampshire. Like, it just has nothing to do with any part of history, but talk about a great movie. Rotten Tomato variants on that, probably not good. What else you have for stock up?
Stock up, the pot calling the kettle, spontaneous and not thinking about things through.
Oh, okay. I wasn't familiar with that idiom, but go on.
Right, yeah, it's a new one. I really liked Holden Miller throughout the book, especially the first 3 quarters. Thought they're great characters. They kind of both are truth tellers, shoot from the hip type guys, which I appreciate. But Holden, we knew his faults kind of were like, he doesn't really think things out. He kind of shoots from the hip, like I said.
He's a little small picture guy.
Exactly. He broadcasted the false flag, so essentially something to basically created a war out to the masses without thinking, who's this going to affect? And then his defense for that was like, yeah, I just presented the facts. Did you though? It'd be like being in a movie theater and being like, fire, fire. And you'd be like, oh my God, everyone tramples and runs away. He's like, I just saw it on the screen. There's fire on the movie screen.
Yeah, or like someone was smoking a cigarette next to you and you scream fire.
And he's like, I just presented facts. It's like, bro, you just started this whole thing.
Yeah.
And then he does it again later. He's not the one that fired the missiles, but he's the ones that broadcasted it. He made it public to everyone.
And he said,
never know.
Yeah, he said it's like the truth, but we all know that the truth is somewhat perspective based, and yeah, probably not the best idea by him.
So once you do that a couple of times, maybe you start rethinking. Maybe the millions of deaths on your hands and the riots you've caused, maybe you start, pulling back a little bit. And maybe you start kind of empathizing with other people that make mistakes. We then see Miller, rightfully so, executes Dresden. A literal mad scientist. A dude that's Hitler / Stalin / Saddam Hussein. Just like one of the worst humans ever. He's creating more mad scientists. He's getting support from people to do his mad science.
Yeah, maybe a little Charles Manson in there too. He's able to convince all these people that it's like the right idea.
When he did that, I was like, come on, Miller, you got to torture this dude first and like make him suffer a lot more, right? That was what I was mad about. I was like, I understand you want to kill him right there, and that's what I thought Holden was going to be pissed about. He's going to be like, bro, this guy needs to suffer more. That was too quick, That's what I thought he was going to say. Instead, he's like, we needed to give this guy a fair trial. It's not fair. And know what this was? This was Mace Windu and Anakin Skywalker. Holden is Anakin Skywalker. Mace Windu is like, this dude's too powerful to stay alive. And I'm like, I agree. Yeah. You need to kill this dude. He needs to be dead. Mm-hmm. You can't let someone like that crazy that also is able to convince people to live. You need to be dead. But it just pissed me off that Holden had this. It's unfair that he did that. Why would you ever do something that's so rash like that? Bro, you have millions of innocent people's lives on your hands. This is an absolute psychopath that Miller just killed. Rightfully so. Way different. Miller is 1,000 times more on the right than you are. So shut the fuck up. Yeah. My stock up was the pot calling the kettle, spontaneous and not thinking things through. So yeah, that's the stock up.
Miller actually took it to him at one point and pretty much told him that. Was like, yeah, you might be mad at me for killing some people, but think about all the people that you've killed based on information you've given out. And it was like, oh shit. He was like, well, maybe I did go too far because now this guy's going to have some serious issues because I just introduced that into his head. It's just a good dichotomy. They both believe in doing the right thing. They're not bad people at all. They just have different ways of going about it. And their moral codes are firm. They have their own moral codes that they believe in wholeheartedly. And they both are going to get to the same place just in different ways.
But if it was reversed and Holden was the one that killed him and Miller's like, come on, bro, we need to let this guy stand trial, I would have got that perspective because Holden is shoot from the hip and he's just too rash, where Miller is the guy that's more detective and let's see the whole picture type stuff, right? But it didn't make sense for him to then go ahead and criticize a guy that just does what he exactly has done multiple times at this point.
Well, Holden's moral code is justice by the people for the people kind of thing. And Miller is more of, I can dole out justice because I don't trust that the people will make the right decision. Well, talk about idioms. My next stock up is having your cake and eating it too. Honestly, I had a vague understanding of this phrase before reading on Google what it means, which is to have or enjoy the good parts of something without having to deal with the bad parts. I still don't understand how having your cake and eating it too has anything to do with that, because I like to have cake and eat it too. And
it's translated from French, so it probably makes sense in France.
Oh,
right?
Je suis cake. Yeah. But it's kind of how I feel about how the authors treated the geopolitical stuff in here, because there's a lot going on politically with the story, with Earth, who's led by the UN, and then you got Mars. They have a vast military. They're working with Earth. The Belters feel oppressed, naturally, and they're led by the OPA. There's like a resistance forming, and there's just a lot there and could be a lot to unpack in a book. But what this book does so well with it is it doesn't dive too deep into the minutia. I know that you're not a huge Dune fan, and I am, but Dune is definitely a book that goes really deep into the political situation. So I think this one having that aspect of it, like the geopolitical aspect, but more focusing on just these two characters and what's actually happening in their situations, and how they're kind of just like figures that are touching onto these geopolitical things very lightly, but not really focusing on those issues. They balanced it really well. And I think they kind of did have their cake and eat it too, because normally if you try to dive into the geopolitical stuff, you then have to have like chapter and chapter of explaining the history of the relationships between the planets. And it's like, oh, it starts to get boring. Do you have any other stock ups?
Last one, shitting where you eat, stock up. I already referenced it earlier, but in this day and age, if you're superior or beneath someone and you start a relationship with them...
Beneath someone. I see what you're doing here.
That's not a good look, and it's opened up to a lot of lawsuits and firings and different things. Holden's out here just tossing the dick around. I mean, he's going for people beneath him, above him, every which way, anyway. You know, no consequences in any way.
Just Jackson Pollock whitewashing that entire ship.
And apparently just every single woman is like throwing themselves at him. And I was like, wow, this is a different world out there.
Men want to be him and women want to be with him.
Right, of course.
He's an international man of mystery. I needed to see him in action, honestly, because his advances I didn't find to be, he was no Johnny Depp and Don Juan.
And the reason that Naomi liked him is because there was some woman that really, really liked him and he didn't flirt with her. And I was like, that's it?
I also feel like his approach with women was not in line with his character, or maybe it was. I don't know, but they're saying how he basically convinces himself that he is in love with these women that are in love with him, and then he sleeps with them, and then after a while he's like, oh, okay, I actually wasn't in love with you, and like moves.
Yeah, isn't that just describing a fuckboy?
Yeah, like not a nice guy, really.
You can do whatever you want, but you can't paint him as he's such a good dude.
Quote unquote, convincing himself he's in love with these women. Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Yeah. Hey, whatever you gotta do to make yourself feel not like a piece of shit. I know that game. What?
All right, let's move on to stock down. My first stock down, riot control. Unfortunately, in the United States over the last few years, there's been some rioting. But at the same time, what do? We water cannons, tear gas. These things are terrible. They're not good for people. No one wants to be hit in the face with a fire hose. Women and children running through the street, wiping tear gas out of their eyes. It's terrible. You shouldn't do this to your people. But in this world, they use this like THC laced gas to control riots. Honestly, that makes too much sense to me. It's not going to hurt you long term. And you spray it at the people. They're like kind of irritated for a second. Then all of a sudden they're like, man, why am I fighting?
Let's go get some food.
Yeah, like I could really go for some Doritos right now. There's a 7-Eleven there. Instead of smashing in the window, we should just walk in and get some honey buns. And we'll get out of here. Like,
problem solved. Yeah,
new episode of Survivor tonight. That sounds fun. But actually, I'm thinking about it right now, and this may create riots because someone's like, I got $5. The weed guy's not picking up. Yeah. Do we just go into the town center and start kicking over mailboxes and let the police do it for us?
It's a great point, actually. Yeah. It's like, concert tonight? Let's get a little riot going, go to the concert, get a little pregame.
Yeah, or just start the riot in the parking lot of the concert. Sure.
Yeah, love that.
What do you have for stock down?
I only had one, and it was putting the worst people on the job, stock down. In the real world, when you put the worst people to do the job, they do the worst job of all time. That's the end result. That is every time. There's no scenario where they're like, this guy sucks. Let's let him do it because we know he'll screw it up. That's what happens. That's what ends up happening. Like that's
Okay.
However, in the movie world and the book world, this is like the opposite. There's like numerous cases of movies and books where they're like, oh, they put him on the case because like they knew he would like wouldn't be the guy to get it done, and like we can manipulate him or whatever. And then that person in a lot of these scenarios, I'll give you a couple. Fracture, have you seen that? Great movie.
Is that the Anthony Hopkins movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. With Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, it's like a crime thriller, twisty.
Snake Eyes. Great movie, even though it's terrible Rotten Tomato score.
So saw in the theaters. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
The other guys, My Cousin Vinny. There's a few others that I couldn't think of, but like they're all like, they like put the worst people on. And what ends up happening in all these movies is that in books, like they end up becoming obsessed with the case and don't give it up, even though they're initially put on it only because they're the worst. So that doesn't really happen in real life, but that happens the same thing with Miller. Miller is put on the Julie Mao case because they're like, okay, we don't really want to take this seriously because we kind of know what actually happened. Let's put on the most alcoholic, the guy that doesn't care about anything, onto this, and he'll fucking blow it off, or he'll suck at it, so it won't matter. But we'll say we put someone on it, right?
Yeah, I feel like he was
And he becomes
almost
obsessed.
He was almost like a quarterback that they thought like aged out, and he got one more contract and then went on to like do great things, maybe like a Stafford or something like
Kurt
that.
Warner on the Cardinals.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Miller in this situation, so his boss is part of the OPA. So she knew what the deal was with Julie Mao. Put him on the case because he's a drunkard now. And they think he's washed up, but he ain't washed up. Like his arm still works. He's got accuracy and he's got the know-how of being in this league.
Has he been concussed a few times? Sure.
Oh,
Why
yeah.
not? Yeah.
Oh, hundreds.
Yeah, a couple times.
Hundreds.
Will he have
Self-concussed.
CTE later?
Yeah.
Yes, he will.
Yeah. Does this man have demons? Absolutely. But unfortunately, those demons manifest in his head and they help him solve the case. But I really enjoyed Miller as a detective. I thought the way that they explained how he approached like the thought process of like scenes and stuff like that, like a crime scene or something along those lines, or even just like walking into a room and trying to read people. I thought they just explained that really well, or like made you understand.
Breaking up the riot, I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah, like I used to read like Batman comics back in the day, and the Batman comics are so much better than the movies in the sense that like Batman is a detective, and the movies always have these like crazy scenes where almost like a montage where he's like doing something, and it doesn't really work how he would in the comic books where he was literally going to crime scenes and like reading the scene.
The new Batman's a little bit more detective-esque though, right? Wouldn't you say?
The one with Pattinson? Yeah. That one did it
Closer to the comic books.
way closer to the comic books. So yeah, I'm with you there. My next stock down is mushrooms. So not a huge fan of them myself.
Well, what kind of mushrooms are we talking about here?
The ones that don't psilocybe yourself. Although you put those in a tear gas canister and I might be all in. But I'm a food guy, but I don't really like the mushrooms. Sure, if they're in a stir fry, no problem. I'll eat them. I'm not going to work around them or something along those lines. But it's just not a big fan of mine. And it looks like in this future we have here, especially if you're a belter, it involves eating a lot of fungus-based foods. So for that reason, I'm out.
Yeah, the food was gross. Well, if you've never had a cheeseburger.
Yeah, but there was like different times like towards the end on Earth. And he's like, have a strawberry. And like he's obviously had a strawberry before. It was like, this is the first time I've had a strawberry. So I think they periodically, plus there was like the cheese thing he was talking about. They've had real stuff, I'm sure. So they know what it tastes like. So now you have to deal with this terrible fungus-based stuff. Although they did have, and I really enjoyed the scene when they were making food together. Like the whole crew was, Holden and his crew were making food together. That was enjoyable. It kind of reminded me, my buddy in college, he was in the ROTC, so my roommate, and so he just always had MREs on hand, and we would periodically try them, and they were terrible.
Wash it down with some Tang or what?
Tang is delicious. But when they were making their food in like together, Holden and his crew, it almost reminded me of how my buddy would tell me like him and his friends when they go out, his ROTC buddies, they'd like combine all the different foods in different ways to like actually make something that was palatable. And I was like, oh, that's, creativity out in the field. I love that.
Is there any food out there that you think of that we're like priced out of that's like amazing? I know like people, you don't eat caviar and stuff.
Yeah,
Is there anything that's
caviar.
like, it's kind of like an oyster, right? It's almost like, oh, it's cool to have, but it's not like you're like, man, I could go for some caviar right
Well,
now.
I live in Cape Cod, so I can get oysters whenever I want. I just walk into the water. There you go. Oyster right there.
We're just lucky not to be priced out of any. It's like, imagine if to eat a cheeseburger, it would cost $75. You just like would never have a cheeseburger. You'd just be like, oh, this is brutal.
I think perspective matters too, in that we live in the United States and, we're middle class people. So,
but rich people are eating like McDonald's. They're not eating some food that we can never attain.
yeah, I was thinking more like worldwide.
Oh, I see what you're saying. We have abundancy here.
I mean, McDonald's is great. Don't get me wrong. I fucking love McDonald's. We've addressed this before. But yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know like what we're necessarily like priced out of. Granted, if someone that was poorer went to a restaurant and they had a lobster roll on the menu, like lobster rolls here are like $40. It's absurd. I would never eat a lobster roll in that case. And I still don't because they're $40. I'm like, that's not worth it to me. So, but yeah,
okay.
Interesting. I'm
Lobster
sure
roll's a
they're
good one.
Well, the beluga caviar, like the real caviar, is like $1,000 an ounce or something like that. So,
oh, really? Okay.
Probably not going to eat that. Did you have a favorite scene in this?
My favorite scene by far was when they go to Eros.
Escape from Eros.
Yeah, and the thing starts to fall apart, and especially Miller. I mean, again, this is why I really like Miller.
It's where he shines, really.
He just starts walking in, like, in the place and just kind of taking charge, starts shooting people when he needs to, and I'm like, this is my guy. That if like I were playing a video game or something where you can just determine your choices, I do what he's doing. Just being like, let's walk in, let's start shooting people when they're getting in our way, manipulating people when we need to.
Yeah, like him gut-shotting the guy just so that then they can drag him like 3 stories down as he's screaming. So they could be like, oh, someone shot him. Like, take this guy. It's like, wow, that was calculated and fucked up.
Yeah, it was great.
That's also the first time we see these vomit zombies, which are pretty fucking cool. And they also, him and Holden both irradiate themselves, which is not so cool. So this book is part of a sci-fi channel series, The Expanse. And this book, I think, covers like the first season and a half. I would watch it because it looks like they actually put some serious money into it. But I think if I watched it, I might watch an episode and I'd be like, just get me to the Eros one. Like, I need to see that scene. I feel like that would be the culmination of that show. It was the best part of this book. And if there was a movie or something like that, this is the part you'd want to see in the movie. I mean, you already said Miller was your favorite character. I think he's mine. He's mine as well.
Yeah, I think you'd choose between Miller or Holden. I mean, there's really no other main characters that we kind of got introduced to.
Yeah, but I mean, like Amos, pretty cool guy. Fred was an interesting character. I was almost waiting for him to like turn on them at some point.
Yeah,
but he didn't. And also like the way that both Holden and Miller approached their respective relationships with him, I was like, oh, this guy Fred he's the butcher of Anderson Station. Like, you don't talk to him like that. But he seemed totally fine with it, so maybe he's just a good people person.
He could have pulled like, do you know the fuck I am? I guess he does it to both of them, but Miller's like, listen, if I give you this location, I got to know that you actually know what you're doing when you attack this thing. And he's like, I've had some experience. He's like super humble about it. He's like, I think I know what I'm doing.
Right,
and they're like, he's like, you got to prove it to me. And they're like, yo, you don't know who this dude is. This is Michael Jordan of fucking taking places over.
Yeah,
so
like, this guy crushes skulls, of course.
Yeah,
this is the butcher of Anderson Station. But also when Holden's talking to him at the beginning, when they kind of first meet, he's like, I'm going to keep the ship. Here's what I'm going to do.
He is talking kind of down to him a little bit.
Or telling, giving him orders a little bit. Let's get into some love-hate. Keith, what did you love about Leviathan Wakes?
I mean, it's great world building. I really did like the noir detective element. I love it when in sci-fi or any sort of futuristic involves a story that doesn't need to necessarily be sci-fi or futuristic, right?
Great point.
At the end of the day, you just want a good story. And then when you add in the additional elements of world building and things like that, it makes it great, in my opinion. I also don't like being on this world. I like being everywhere else and imagining things.
Whoa, what? Pardon me?
What?
You don't like being on this world? So do
Yeah,
we have
in
something
a
to talk
book,
about?
and when I'm on acid.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah,
I thought you were saying you had some issues going on. You need to talk to somebody. You know, I just want to make sure you're all right.
We've talked about this before. That's why you don't read a lot of nonfiction. I know there's a ton of issues in the world. I don't need to read more about those. I'd rather just be in some other world that has other problems that are like kind of cool to think about.
With this geopolitical stuff, you can approach it from a blank mindset in a little bit because you don't have any horse in the race. Where if it's something real, it's tough to really look at that without having some prejudices. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Or having, some preconceived notions prior to reading.
My love, the Miller-Holden dynamic, I just thought was so well done. We have this story in third person following around Holden and Miller. Like the entire story, except for I think right at the end when you get a little Fred in there, is just a camera right behind Holden the whole time, or we're a camera behind Miller. And we know, especially at the beginning, we know these stories are eventually going to collide. They're two independent stories at the beginning, and they're both interesting. You have Miller doing his like detective stuff, trying to find Julie Mao, while also you get the whole series dynamic and like that whole place. And then you get Holden doing like the actual like space stuff. And Holden's story at the beginning is almost kind of like Alien, where he's on this freighter kind of in space. You know, they're just blue collar people trying to chip ice. I really liked how those stories set up, but you know they're going to collide. And when you do, you get this fun moral dynamic like we talked about. They both think what they're doing is right, but they come at it from totally different perspectives. Holden is virtuous and uncorruptible, while Miller, you know, he's been on the streets of Sears Station and has seen the darker sides of humanity. So he knows how things work in the real world and responds to situations as he sees fit. They're almost like Captain America in Holden and Iron Man in Miller. You know, that is if like Captain America chased more skirts and Iron Man only had a couple of nickels in his pocket. They both are right and they're both trying to do good, but they just butt heads constantly, but they both respect each other. I just love that relationship.
When the two characters you're following somehow collide or come together, that's always great. And then you add in the fact that it was on Eros, that the greatest, like the best scene. That was like the climax for the book for me because it was like
I climaxed.
Those things, those two things combined, and then you have an amazing scene around it. It was like, oh shit, this is sick.
Yeah. What else do you love?
I like the good mix of characters, the space politics, aka the space opera, if you will, the mystery. I like the idea in the future you can create like a house perfume or a smell to it. Like they like had artificial smelling like fresh bread. Although I don't know if I'd like that though. Also too, because then I just want bread. I'd be like, fresh cookies in here? Where are they? And they'd be like, no, that's just the smell of the house. I'd be like, I'm gonna murder someone now. You can't do that to me. You know?
I'd have like pine forest or something like that. Something that I don't want to eat.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Or maybe like the beach, the ocean.
But then you want to be like, oh, look at the view, and it's like, yeah, still on like a desolate.
Or if you
rock.
made it realistic, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, the tide's gone out. It smells like balls. My second and last love is the melting pot that is the belt. It's a really interesting idea of the asteroid belt, which then is going to have all these different like stations on it, and how the people that go there, it's almost like gold rush kind of, how people probably originally went out there, but then, you know, you start families and they're coming from all different places. So it reminded me in my mind of kind of the streets of Blade Runner, you know, where there's just these markets that are flowing into the streets and there's seedy areas and it's probably a little sketchier than normal stuff, but there's different cultures that have like come together and formed weird cuisines and dialects, and it just seemed like a really interesting idea that they translated so well from their minds to paper that I would be down if one of these novellas or whatever was like just Miller doing detective work when he was pre-drunk or whatever, when he was at his best. I just love to see it in this area because it did remind me a lot of Blade Runner. Did you have hates or did you have any other loves?
Yeah, hate-wise, the reason I didn't like the ending and kind of the last part of the book was really just because it's the opposite of my loves. The loves were like, it felt real, and like it's a noir, it's a mystery, and the end was like, it's aliens, zombies / someone taking over, like Julie Mao's brain goes into the organism. I was like, wait, what's going on now? Like it seemed like a completely different book at the second half, which kind of lost me. I wish it kind of stayed more grounded in terms of like, this is the real world and there's things going on. Instead it was like, and now the spacecraft jumped. I'm like, what's happening now? What's going on? You know? So, and then also I didn't really like any of the relationships with, well, I've already touched on it before, but Holden and the soap opera with the girl, like they didn't add anything for me. I was like, okay.
With Naomi?
Yeah. I was just like, okay, who cares?
You need a love interest. Did you read Don Quixote in school?
No.
Yeah, we did in like Spanish class, and I was like, so you had to read it in Spanish and then like talk about it. I was out. O-U-T, out. Vamonos. So I didn't really understand the allegories there, but I assumed there were some, considering Holden named their ship after Don Quixote's horse. And then I think probably the idea of like Miller with Julie was kind of like him tilting at windmills. I know that much about Don Quixote that he.
What is the windmill stuff? Because in the Wikipedia I kept on reading windmills, and I was like, I don't know what does this mean.
So yeah, Don Quixote was like trying to kill dragons or something. I mean, who knows? I'm in uncharted territory.
Okay,
here.
all right.
I'm
It was in Spanish. They're like, no, that wasn't dragons. That was.
But he was like trying to kill dragons or something, and instead was like fighting windmills. Like he imagined the windmills to be dragons. So he was tilting at windmills. So yeah, I guess that's it. But maybe like Julie's apparition was part of that. I don't really know. I'm sure there's some smart person. If there's a smart person that's read this book, let us know, because I would love to know if there's some deeper meaning there. But yeah.
The Julie Mao obsession was I was like, I don't really understand what's going on anymore.
Yeah, a little jailbaity too. I was like, Miller, you're up in. At first he was like, I don't like love her, and then he was like, wait, I kind of do love her. I'm like,
the jailbait? You mean necrophiliac? What do you mean? Especially after seeing her dead body with spikes coming out and stuff, you would think he'd be like, and I'm out, Instead he was like, I now connect with her more.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's like, God, those shoulder horns are so fucking hot. Let's get into some listener mail. What do we got?
You've got mail.
We got Jane from Seattle. Wants to know, if you were the captain of the Rosie, between friends and celebs, who would be in your crew? You can choose a pilot, a hired gun / muscle, and a second in command get shit done. So thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Jane. To be clear, though, we have a pilot who's Alex. We have Amos, the engineer, who's ex-military. And then we have Naomi, who's the chief engineer, also many other things. I like it. What do you got? Tell me.
I'm not going to name friends because other than you, I don't think anyone's going to know anyone else.
Well, I was going to say for pilot, like your buddy who I met on the beach in the vineyard, who's actually a fighter pilot. I was like, well, I'm going to go the same wavelength there. I'm going Maverick, Top Gun. Oh, I thought about that.
I mean, if we're going to need a pilot, we're going Maverick, you know? I just saw there's new Netflix, American Made, I think it's called. It's with Tom Cruise, and
I think that movie is like 80/80 on Rotten Tomatoes. Like it's very well liked across the board.
Okay.
Yeah, we had like a shitty movie Sunday years ago or whenever it came out, and my roommate was like, "Oh, like let's watch this." I was like, "All right, sure, whatever." And I was like, "This movie was really good." So for the pilot, I feel like you have to be unflinching and reactionary, ready for anything. So with that, I'll take Jack Swigert, command module pilot on Apollo 13, but I want the Kevin Bacon version. If he can do all the shit he did on Apollo 13, which had the computing power of a TI-83 calculator, then imagine what he'd be able to do with the hands on the sticks of the Rosie.
Hired gun muscle. I mean, there's only one answer that I'll ever give for this forever, and it's Mitch Rapp. So, I mean, we all know that.
Is he going to engineer, though? Is he able to fix
No,
shit?
it is a hired gun muscle. I don't care. He doesn't need to do that. It's like when we get on planet, he's just going to make things happen. He's basically Miller to the 100th degree on arrows when he just started shooting people in the stomach and like making shit happen.
Yeah, but unfortunately, you're in space, and like the scene when they're having a space battle and they need all these pipes fixed and whatnot. He's in the crawl space, no regard for his own life.
Those fights wouldn't go down like that if Mitch Rapp was there. He'd be shooting people between the eyes. He'd be like, just shoot me off into their ship. I'll be a one-man wrecking crew. We won't need to battle these people.
All right, if you say so. I mean, for Amos, For me, he's got to be fearless, follow orders, and can fix anything. Those are the three.
Okay.
I'm going with Phil Swift, the Flex Seal guy. All he needs is Flex Seal. That shit alone can fix anything. So if he's got a, Batman utility belt of Flex Seals, we're good. Like the Rossi's not going down because he's got that fixed. We know he's fearless because he got in that boat where the bottom was replaced with a screen door. If you're going to put Flex Seal on a screen door and get in a boat, you got to have no fear. So I respect that. And the concern here would be, can he follow orders? I'm not sure, but he can definitely take orders because once that commercial aired, those orders came flying in. So I'm going with Phil Swift, Flex Seal guy.
Well done. Well done. Great answer. I'll give you that one. That was good.
Who do you got for Naomi?
So again, I did what he had asked, the second command that gets shit done.
Whoa. Are you saying I'm not following the direction? And by he, is Jane a he? You said he.
Jane, sorry. I went with somewhat of a comic relief. I mean, we already have Mitch Rapp. He's getting stuff done. So we don't need to worry about someone getting something done. And Mitch Rapp can be second in command if needed. But comic relief that also has some money and some brains that can be engineering. Tony Stark. So we get the money coming in. Ooh. So if we ever run into a problem, we need to go to a couple brothels when we land on Eros or whatnot, or wherever we're landing. He got the money to supply there, and he's an engineering genius. So when we get into battle and you needed someone crawling through those pipes to fix things, bada boom, bada bing.
Yeah.
Tony Stark.
You really made up for your engineering issues before by having Tony Stark on.
I got a well-rounded crew there.
Yeah, but you missed an aspect, which is
someone you can sleep with.
Yeah. So Naomi, my second in command, my chief engineer, has to be a jack of all trades. Your right hand, your chief engineer, your consigliere, and most.
You don't need a right hand kid when you got a Naomi, if you know what I mean.
Most importantly, she has to be a lot of vagina. Hey, it gets lonely in space, Keith. It gets lonely in space.
Yeah, listen, I get it.
So for my Naomi, I'm going to go with Presidential Medal of Freedom winner Melinda Gates.
Okay.
So listen. She runs the largest private charitable organization in the world. So she can obviously handle all sorts of tasks. I have no issue with her handling the ship at one point, political issues the next, telling me what I need to do. She's there for me. She's a former programmer, which will definitely come in handy on the ship, as we've seen Naomi do. She was changing programs and all that stuff. So Melinda's going to help me there. And she's recently single. So I'm not going to be stepping on any toes when I make an advance. That's really important for me. Although in my research about her, I did extensive research. And I take listener mail very seriously. I didn't find anything about her athletic prowess, which concerns me about her ability to play goalgoal, which is supposedly, according to the book, a mixture between darts and soccer. So Melinda might be lacking in that department, but the rest of it, she's got it. So that's my Naomi. Call me Melinda.
Well, her last name shouldn't be Gates anymore, right?
Well, it's like Melinda Honey Gates or something like that. I can't remember what her maiden name is, but something like that.
We don't call women honey anymore, kid. Come on, grow up. It's 2023.
It's something like that, though. I can't remember what it is.
And then I quickly casted the movie, just Miller and Holden. And let me know what you think of this. Just running back training day. We're going to do Holden, Ethan Hawke, the shoot from the hip, but, always ethical guy. And Miller, Denzel, alcoholic from, Flight or from...
Let's go. Yeah.
Well, the one where he's protecting them. I love that. Chemistry together would be perfect. So bring them both back.
Miller almost reminded me of like an old Humphrey Bogart movie when Humphrey Bogart, like Maltese Falcon or something like that. So yeah, if I can, I'm gonna dig Humphrey up. I don't know any of the things you just said, but all right. Put some life into him. I'm going with Humphrey Bogart. You never seen Casablanca? Come on, we'll always have Paris. Leviathan Wakes. Would you recommend it?
I would. I do think it ended in a sour note. The first half of it, I do think it was like, this is top 10 material. The second half, wasn't the biggest fan, but overall, it was the world building, the story, the writing was still good. I think the second book is higher rated, so I'd almost be interested in jumping into that and giving it another chance. It's not definitely not read the second one, but I'm not, right when I got done with it, I was like, I'm not like ready to go for the next one, which a lot of the books we've read that are top 10, I am, so that's the big difference.
Yeah. Where's the follow-up to Matthew McConaughey Green Lights? We need part 2.
What about you? Would you recommend it?
Yeah. I feel like we haven't read sci-fi in a while. It was nice to get back into some sci-fi. And I feel like we've read other, like more like fantasy world building, but like sci-fi stuff was cool. I feel like it was more of a fun book as opposed to, I've read like Dune, reread Dune in the last year, and I love Dune, don't get me wrong. You're paying attention, you're really focused. This is just like kind of you're hanging out with these guys as some crazy shit goes down. So it felt like the stakes, at least for me emotionally, weren't necessarily as high, which is, I appreciate it. It's not a knock on it at all. Yeah, I didn't have any problem with the ending, honestly. It was definitely a little odd for sure, and like got way more into the like sci-fi type stuff, but I was cool with it. And I also would say though that I wasn't like, ooh, I need to read the next one, maybe because this was a 20-hour book, maybe not something you're immediately ready to continue with, and I was kind of glad to try something else. But at the same time, I would definitely, if someone was like, hey, I like sci-fi books and I've read these, I'd be like, hey, have you read Leviathan Wakes? Because you should check that out. It's good stuff. So yeah, that's where I am. All right, well, that was fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks to our listeners who recommended it. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And let us know if you've read the later ones, because I'd be interested to know if those also slap, as the kids say. Stick around after we sign off here, because we're going to have a quick message from our buddies at Bandcamp. And that's not the one where people put flutes in their vaginas. It's the Banned Book Podcast. They're reading banned books and chatting about them. Pretty interesting premise. So yeah, check out their stuff, because we got to support each other in this community. There's not a lot of people out here reading books and talking about them, except for my kindergarten teacher, but those are really short books and I usually fell asleep. So Keith, what do we got coming up next?
Coming up next, we have Killers of the Flower Moon by David GRANN. And I believe this is a nonfiction. Yeah, it's a nonfiction book. So we've not read a lot of nonfiction. But as you may have seen, there's a Scorsese movie coming out with Leo in it. Yeah, that's on the docket next.
Yeah, so if you're interested in checking out that movie, which, I mean, you got Scorsese, you got Leo, why wouldn't you be interested in checking it out? It's a nonfiction, so if you want to know a little bit more, because obviously they can't squeeze it all into the 2.5 hours that's going to be a Martin Scorsese movie, maybe delay going to see it. Read the book yourself, come join us for a little convo, and then grab the wife, grab some popcorn, and grab some of those tear gas riot weed stuff, and go check it out in theaters. Cool. Well, until next time. Bye now.
Bye now.
Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm Jen, and we're the hosts of Bandcamp, a comedy podcast where we read banned books and try to figure out why they were banned in the first place.
This season, we're reading The Outsiders, one chapter at a time, out loud so you don't have to.
If you enjoy funny, smart talk,
Or kind of smart talk anyway, about banned books and the stupid reasons some people want to ban them,
as well as listening to us read a classic book,
search for Bandcamp on your favorite podcast player, and that's banned with 2 N's.